calling me. I'm so sorry about the email thing. I should have just said initially, just call me whenever you have a second. Because I don't know about you, but I don't check my email. Like, I don't have alerts on my email just because.
Okay.
Well, but that's like, said something about your age. I was just talking to my daughter about that, and she said, yeah, I check my email once a month. Because, there's all these layers of communication, and I'm in the middle, and for me, texting is the quickest one, and for anyone under the age of 20, it's like, that's even, anyway, it's Snapchat, Instagram, and email is, you might as well be Facebook or something, It's like, for old people who like to complain a lot, Facebook. So what do you think? I'm kind of doing a general story about the latest wave, and it was interesting to me that OPH in their weekly snapshot yesterday changed their advice on masking and now say you should wear a mask even outdoors if you're in a crowd.
Big surprise! Big surprise! They're changing their advice on masking, right? I mean, it was bad advice.
I was surprised. Yes.
Well, it's a surprise that they. I'm being sarcastic in that they shouldn't have advised doing with the mask in the first place, and many people predicted that they would be reversing that advice at some point. They haven't fully reversed it yet, but we're trickling that way.
Sorry, haven't fully reversed yet? I've got an echo on the phone with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. They haven't fully reversed their advice on masking overall, that masking is no longer recommended, but we're kind of headed that way a little bit, aren't we? Whether we'll fully get there is a political issue, not a scientific one. Scientifically, I think we should all be masking in public indoor spaces. This outdoor space thing, that's interesting. And it's pretty clear that there is outdoor transmission happening. We have many anecdotal cases of people who have no idea how they got the disease, except during a casual conversation at the dog park with someone who leaned in too closely, something like that.
Right.
So, I mean, being outdoors is no guarantee of lack of transmission. It just reduces the probability. But we're dealing here with B4 and B5, which might be the most contagious respiratory viruses known to humankind. And so
the most contagious where?
Respiratory virus known to humankind.
Really? Even more than measles?
Yeah, so if you look at the base reproduction number, that is the average number of cases that an existing case will create before being resolved in a situation where everybody is susceptible. Right? We think the original Wuhan strain had like 3.3, Delta had like 5, we think Omicron had like 9.5 or so, but with B5, the modeling suggests it may be as high as 18 or higher.
18?
Yeah, maybe, right? 15 to 18. And measles is in that category. So it's on par with measles, possibly. Again, I say possibly because no one knows for sure. This is all based on modeling. And the fact that we have a largely susceptible population because of BA5's ability to overcome immunity means that we're not back to square one, but we're in a situation where a larger number of people are susceptible than we think. So it makes sense to create a little more concern and vigilance in outdoor scenarios than we had last summer. That doesn't mean that you should, I'm having outdoor gatherings, my patio and so forth, like everyone is. I don't think that should stop. I just think if you're going to be spending a large amount of time in very close proximity with people whose infectious status you do not know, it is worthwhile wearing a mask.
Okay. I'm thinking particularly the festivals. I mean, I'm sure that I'm not alone in that thinking, wow, is it even safe to go to Blues Fest? I mean, I won a free ticket myself, and I kind of thought, I started reading up on this.
It's an N95 mask does wonders. It does absolute wonders.
Okay.
It's not perfect protection, but it reduces your risk substantially. So I personally think if you want to go to Blues Fest, go to Blues Fest. Just wear your mask. And wear a good mask, not a crappy homemade mask or even a blue surgical mask. Wear an N95 or KN95 and wear it diligently and go enjoy yourself. So that really does open the door to having more opportunities in your life using these simple technologies.
Okay. And would the same go for air travel then? Would you get on an airplane?
I personally would not, only because I have a child under 5 to protect, and my risk tolerance is much different. But I have colleagues who are traveling, and what they do, like Amir Adaran, for example, tweeted his get-up. He wears a P1000 mask. I always forget if it's P1000, P100. But these are extreme upper-level infection control masks. And so if I were going to take a trip, that's exactly what I would do. I would get one of these extreme upper-end masks. If you're going to sit there for hours. Now, the problem isn't the plane. Planes actually have better ventilation than most buildings. And they're mixing with the outdoor air is like 50%, which is extraordinarily good. And it's got unidirectional airflow for the most part. The problem is the amount of time you spend on the tarmac where the airflow system isn't running. And it's the amount of time you spend like in the airport getting on the plane where the air quality is not as good. So for a very long flight, you may be spending more time intimately with somebody else, like leaned over or whatever. And also you can't really predict how much time to spend on the tarmac. So getting an extremely high level mask really reduces that risk substantially. And that's what I would do if I had to fly, and I'd feel pretty confident doing so.
When you say extremely high-level mask, I'm sorry, what did you say the one that Amir Adaran is wearing?
I think it's a P1000 mask, if I'm not incorrect.
Is that something that the average person can get a hold of? Or is an N95 good enough if you're going, on a plane?
Sorry, it's a P100 mask. An average person can get one. They're like, Home Depot has, very similar.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I'm not a mask expert, so you have to check with a mask expert about that. But in general, the super high end virology type guys who wear these extremely bulky, ugly masks.
Oh yeah, that look like a gas mask kind of.
Precisely, yeah. And they're more expensive. They're like maybe not $100, but close to it for a given mask.
Okay.
Anywhere from $30 to $200. But that's optimal protection. So there are things you can do to keep yourself safe. And of course, getting that 4th dose will help because that 4th dose does really increase your protection against initial infection, not just against bad outcomes.
Right.
Again, not perfectly, but measurably.
Now, does the vaccine we're getting, is it really known how much protection it provides against B5 or even B2 for that matter?
No, I haven't seen any data about that. I haven't seen any data about that. I haven't seen any data for it yet. The best data we have around the quality of a 4th dose is from Israel and from USA as well. And it looked at the amount of cases as compared to 3 doses over time when the dominant variants were circulating. But the dominant variants were Omicron and maybe B2. So now that B5 is present, not enough time has gone by to really compute a convincing vaccine efficacy score. However, is it Pfizer or Moderna? I think it's the Pfizer data that talks about their antibody titers against B5. They think their Omicron-specific vaccine will be compelling against it, and they use the antibody titers as an argument. They don't put forward how the equivalent titerage you would get out of a 4th dose of the existing vaccine. And Paul Offit was online talking about this as being a little bit disingenuous because the actual trials that you put forth would compare a 4th dose with an Omicron-specific vaccine versus a 4th dose with the existing vaccine. But instead, they're putting forth the titers of a 4th dose with the Omicron-specific vaccine and not showing the titers of the 4th existing vaccine, suggesting that maybe the titers for the 4th existing vaccine are probably good enough.
Oh boy. Okay. And what about someone, as most people only have 3, and a significant portion only have 2? I mean, how much protection does that offer against sickness caused by B5?
Well, For severe COVID, we don't know. The answer is we don't know. Against Omicron in general, the Israeli data suggests that like 126 out of 100,000 people with just 3 doses got severe COVID versus 52 people out of 100,000. So who got, fourth dose? In other words, fourth doses reduce your risk by 50% or so. But the baseline risk wasn't that high to begin with for 3 doses. With B5, we don't know, and with 2 doses, it's much lower than that. We know with BA5 rather, that it probably doesn't result in more severe disease. The biggest risk is that it overcomes immunity. So you're more likely to become infected. Are you more likely to be hospitalized once infected? I'd be surprised if that was the case. But we just don't know. The more concerning thing, though, is this new data suggesting that with every repeat infection, your risk of a bad outcome increases. So you want to avoid reinfection. And the thing about BA5 is that your odds of reinfection are much higher now. So that's the concerning part here. So maybe the first time around, the absolute risk of a bad outcome is small. Maybe the second time around it's small. Maybe even the third time around it's small. But each time it's ratcheting up. So by the time you get your 5th or 6th infection, your risk of being hospitalized is much higher. Maybe significantly so.
Okay.
So
and the risk of long COVID are higher as well, but with subsequent infections,
yes,
I believe?
It does appear that way, yeah.
Okay. What, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, and everybody says, oh, you know, people are so tired of COVID, they just can't handle any more restrictions. But I'm not sure if no one knows if that's true. It's just kind of one of those things that people say.
Right.
But how do you think public health, what kind of messages do they need to get out to people? I mean, we're not even really getting a lot of information. I was shocked a couple of days ago. I mean, I had some indication, but, you know, Dr. Moore went on CBC or whatever. Of course, he doesn't talk regularly anymore to us, but and said, oh, yeah, we're in another wave. It started 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, thanks for letting us know, you know.
Yes. So this is what we need to do. Number one, tell people that the crisis is not over, that the disease has not gone away. The pandemic is still with us. Number two, tell us that despite that being true, society doesn't have to stop the way it did 2 years ago because we have tools to combat the disease. Number three, what tools? Well, vaccination. Vaccination works. We have to tell people vaccination works, and do not listen to the disinformation campaigners who are trying to scare you away from vaccination. So get your 3rd and 4th dose when you're eligible. Masking also works. Do not listen to the disinformation merchants telling you that masks are a waste of time. Absolutely they work, and they are a low-cost, high-impact tool that all of us can and should use. The next thing I have to tell people is, while vaccination is great and it works, you still have a chance of getting infected, and you have to keep each other safe. Also, there is no advantage in becoming infected. That's a narrative that has become prevalent. People seeking infection because they think that gives them immunity. That is not the case anymore. So avoid infection. And the last thing really is that we can get through this. We have the tools. It doesn't have to disrupt society or our lives. We can live our lives. All it takes is to be respectful of the virus and of each other. Simple messaging, I think, that somehow has been lost in the shuffle.
Okay. Are you familiar with this guy named Paul Alexander?
Well, what's his name? Nicole Alexander?
Pardon me?
I didn't hear his name.
Paul Alexander.
No,
Oh, you're not. Okay. I wanted to ask you about some of the things he was saying. But, I mean, the narrative coming from the convoy people is, well, at the kind of moderate end, they say the vaccine does not prevent transmission, so there's no point in getting it.
I mean, that's just foolish. Sure, the vaccines aren't that great at preventing transmission anymore, but the point of vaccination isn't just that. It's also preventing people from going to the hospital. And it does a very good job of that. And we have an overtaxed hospital system. We have ER rooms that are closing down because of overstaffed understaffing, and because too many people are showing up sick. So if you want to keep a pillar of society running, which is our hospital system, well, we have to have vaccination. Also, the boosts, every time you get boosted, you have an additional few weeks or months of actual protection against infection and transmission. So that bit of that misinformation needs to be combated regularly and vociferously.
Okay. And that's at the, I don't want to say reasonable, but that's at the moderate end. At the other end, they claim the vaccines have killed millions of people.
Yeah, that's crazy. Look, the data is pretty clear on this. So the vaccines have not killed me. In fact, the number of vaccine-caused deaths, handful, if any, the ones that are suspected of doing so are entirely of the AstraZeneca brand because of VITT. The mRNA vaccines are remarkably safe. Oh, sorry. My toddler keeps bursting in here.
Yeah.
I mean, I've tweeted the data so often. Public Health Ontario has made the data public, but in a way that the average person can't understand, sadly. So since we've been collecting this information, the number of vaccine injuries or suspected reported adverse events is minuscule, like a fraction of a %. And those probably aren't even real because they haven't been investigated. So it's complete nonsense.
Okay, yeah, they use this VAERS data.
Yeah, here's the thing about VAERS. People need to understand
They just
VAERS.
love it.
VAERS is nonsense. Here's why it's nonsense. Almost anyone can submit a VAERS report. All VAERS is a registry for scientists to investigate later on. It's not meant for data analysis. You've got some examples of people reporting gunshot wounds as adverse events of the vaccine. Honestly. Right?
Yes, and pregnancy.
Exactly.
And becoming Elvis. I'm not kidding. That's some of it.
And there's been efforts to have VAERS made non-public, but of course the anti-vax politicians keep combating that. So VAERS is nonsense.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. What about it? I keep hearing this too, that the not the number, but the rate of hospitalized people who are vaccinated is with 3 doses is higher. I mean, in other words, you're more likely to be hospitalized with COVID.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's true necessarily in every jurisdiction. In some jurisdictions it's true, but think about who is getting vaccinated for 3 doses. Who is first in line? Who is eligible? The extremely sick and elderly.
They have more.
Right.
Yeah.
Once it's opened up to everybody, then see what happens.
Of course, right.
It's a selection. You call that selection bias.
Yeah, selection bias. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
I think what I'd like to see is more effort put in by public health to clean up the messaging. I know that's a huge task, especially combating misinformation and disinformation. And that's a full-time job. You got to pivot all the time because the disinformation merchants are well-funded and organized. But I think that probably will do a lot of good because people are willing to share good information. They just feel poorly armed to do that task. So if we, supposed scientists, are able to better arm the public to have those discussions, I think a lot of good will happen.
Okay. I was thinking of myself of just collecting because I've been covering the convoy and reading all their or listening mainly that they mainly communicate via 3-hour videos. And some of the most common things they're saying and just, laying them out and explaining them. Because they often sound, apart from the context of who's saying it and the way they say it, that they can sound quite reasonable. And they have a couple of doctors they keep trotting out to, as their experts.
I don't want to disrespect, other professionals. Every voice must be heard if it's a serious voice and they have data to offer, absolutely. But there comes a time when you have to look at the actual arguments and ask yourself, is there sufficient expertise and insight put on these arguments? For example, there's a paper out recently by Peter Doshi, I think it is, that looked at vaccine injury and it kind of found just what you're talking about, that the vaccinated are far more likely to have these outcomes that are poor. If you took a deep dive statistically into the data and they presented, it's almost professional misconduct. I was going to blog about this. They commit a horrible sin in statistics called p-hacking, where they just They just cherry pick those aspects of the data to get a statistically significant signal. Right? And if you haven't got the expertise to see it, you'd be easily blinded by this. And a lot of physicians aren't trained in statistics or in research methods. That's not their training. Their training is to treat people. And so all you see is a published paper that finds, oh my God, vaccines are injuring people. You would run with that. So we have to be cognizant of what our limitations are. I'm not a clinician. I don't know how to treat people, and therefore I should not make any allusions to that fact. The same token, if you're a physician not trained in statistics or research methods at a very high level, you should be very careful about the kinds of papers that you trot out and critique and support. And that's what's happening here, I think.
And there's just thousands. There appears to be thousands of papers, and it's quite confusing for everybody. I think. I mean, people are, sending me things saying, "Well, this paper was published in the Journal of Infectious Diseases, blah blah blah."
There are a lot of crappy journals out there. Like Timothy Caulfield tweeted a great paper the other day called "Birds, What the Fuck," right? And that's a paper that was published in a predatory journal, and the entirety of the journal is, "Hey, birds are weird. They got feathers and stuff." Well, that's the paper, because anything gets published. And Gideon MK, who's just a great health communicator from Australia, he has a paper out looking at the number of retracted COVID studies. So 200 COVID studies were retracted in the last 2 years, all of which continue to be cited, right?
Really?
Despite the fact that they've been retracted.
That's
I can send that link
What's
to you.
his name? I can look that up.
Well, I can't pronounce his last name. It's a thick name.
Okay, yeah.
But he goes by Gid, G-I-D, -MK.
Okay.
Health Nerd on Twitter, Health Nerd.
Oh, Health Nerd. Okay, right.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar. We had a reporter who just made a little. He just loved doing stories about predatory journals, and he would take like all kinds of weird stuff. Like he used everything all blended together. Old philosophers and just whatever, all kinds of babblegum. He'd send it in to see if they would publish it.
Yes.
Oh, he did so many funny stories about it. Every single thing was published.
Like, I've got a couple of papers in predatory journals probably that I didn't think about.
Oh, really?
It's hard to identify them. This looks like a rational journal. I send the paper off and they accept it. Okay, great. And I realize, I'm not sure that was a great journal after all. So
oh dear.
They do
yeah,
prey
well,
on young
it's
scholars.
difficult for you. I mean, I'm just terrified of to the point where I just assume that I can't tell whether, unless it's coming from some institution that I recognize or people who I recognize from Twitter that are, part of the debate kind of thing.
There are strategies. I mean, a good librarian can guide you through the strategy, but a rule of thumb is if it appears on the PubMed database, it's probably a good journal. But even good journals can publish crap. Like that, the paper I mentioned with the bad statistics, the p-hacking, that was in BMJ, I think. And BMJ should know better.
Really?
Yeah. So,
wow.
Gotta be careful.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much, as always. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.